Call the roll. Chairman Kostick is absent tonight. Kennedy's here. Schmidtke? Riley?
Absolutely.
Bedursis?
That'd be me. Here.
Here. Cloutier? Here. Bundy?
Budney.
Sorry?
Budney.
Budney?
Present.
That's what you said. Jim didn't hear you.
He didn't hear me.
I heard him.
Mr. Van Oss? Okay, first order of business, we'll approve the agenda. I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have the minutes from our October 8th meeting. If you've all had a chance to review them, we'll accept a motion to approve and file them.
I had somebody say at the end of the meeting when it came to the commissioners' report, I reported on our new trash hauler. They said they were not collecting any metal. And I think that should be in the minutes.
Yep. Yeah, it's there.
Express concern regarding the draft showing metal as being an item we do not recycle.
And Derek said he was gonna address that with Ben.
Yeah.
Was that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And the brochure that everybody should have received at their home last week shows metal as an
Yes.
acceptable item.
Yes, it does. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Support.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Chairman, just as a point of information, we did have an executive session prior to that meeting. I did do minutes on the executive session as well, and those will be held for a period of time. I guess I'd need to check with Brian to see if those need to be approved by the
They do.
DPS commission, so
They do.
we'll put those on the next
Be
agenda.
that next
in
meeting?
December.
Okay.
Yep,
And it'll be just that, about approving those minutes.
sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, in our packet, item number 6, page number 6, we have the bills and vouchers. Are there any questions? This is a little different format than we've had in the past.
It is, and it's the new format. This is the way you'll be seeing it from now on.
Read, I think. All had a chance to review them. I'll entertain a motion to accept those.
So moved.
We have the treasurer's report. If there's any questions about that, if not, we'll entertain a motion to accept the treasurer's report.
I move to accept the treasurer's report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment. I don't see any public in the audience, so we'll proceed to our action items. First action item is the approval of the Wayne County Winter Supplemental Maintenance. We've done this since, was it 2006? And the expenditure this year, which is based on last year's costing, is $29,340.39 for 21.4 miles of roadway. And we have a listing of the roadways that are involved in that. It was already approved by the board on the 4th, on their meeting, and they just want our blessing on this.
Well, it was approved with the contingency that we
that we
approve it now
We
tonight.
approve it now. So is there any discussion on that? Anybody have any questions, discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Support.
We have motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed, me.
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4,
5-1.
ayes, 1 nay. Any comment on that, Les?
I have voted no for that ever since it was brought up in the road committee.
Okay,
That's been a long time ago.
It's a habit.
all right.
That's what John Neidhart was the,
One, one nay out of spite.
well, I don't think we should be paying to do all their work.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the SUEZ contract terms. We all recall from our meeting on the 8th of October in private session, we proposed to not take the bid proposal that was presented, but to modify it and to request a 1-year extension of our current contract with just a cost of living increase, and then to go into a 2% increase and a consumer price increase for 5 years, and then if accepted, we could extend that for another 5 years with just a consumer price increase adjustment annually.
It-
So,
Yeah, and although it says CPI, it's the dual price indexes, the employee price index and the CPI, just like it is now.
okay,
I mean, we've been doing this for 5 years. That stays the same. The one thing that I would want to point out, Phil, is that we finish out our contract to March of 2020. Then we extend the contract for 1 year with just the CPI EPI.
correct.
And during that time, we're going to do a audit, and after that year, then we'll go to a 5-year.
Correct.
So it's if you look at your letter of October 10th, number 3 is what I'm talking about.
Well, then, as I would read this, Jim, we're at the conclusion of the 1-year term. We can enter into a 5-year contract option. We're not really bound for more than 1 year. Is that true?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we wanted to look at that audit.
Right. So we have 1 year, which we can do our audit. Then we have the 5-year option with the 5-year renewal option on top of that.
Correct, 2
Correct.
5-year options.
2 5-year options.
So at this point, we're really not locked into much of anything.
Right, and they did. They pretty much accepted all our terms, so that was.
There is language in the contract that both parties can terminate the contract even during term. So there was an email that was attached to this indicating that SUEZ was receptive to the proposal as designed in this letter and as discussed with the DPS Commission a month or so ago. And they actually have already formulated and sent along an amendment to the current agreement stipulating these terms and conditions, which obviously we have to run by the township board and also by legal to make sure they're okay with it. The motion before you tonight is just to recommend that approval to the township board. If the terms and conditions and the stipulations listed in the attached letter are acceptable to the DPS Commission.
Correct. So are there any questions? Anybody? Any questions on this? We'll entertain a motion to send this to the township board recommending approval.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Derek, this will be the lead and copper rule revisions. I'm going to ask you to comment on this.
Sure, and I'm going to ask for John's help a little bit on the explanation of this, but the reason it's on your agenda for this evening is just to make the DPS Commission aware, if you aren't already aware, of the lead and copper rule revisions of 2018 that the Township of Grosse Ile and all communities that supply water in the state of Michigan are going to be required to comply with. Attached to this memorandum is a summary of the lead and copper rule revisions of 2018, and explains the additional responsibilities that the Township of Groseal and once again all other municipal water supplying entities are required to comply with, which includes additional testing, frequency, location, and different standards, the requirements to establish a lead service line inventory, and then also the mandates in that legislation for the municipality to replace lead service lines, not partially, but all the way up and into the home. So we wanted to make you aware of those requirements and those responsibilities, and then also facilitate conversation on the best way to implement and to work to comply with the new standards that were established in this new rule. So
Is that like when you say into the home, that's right to the water meter inside? Is that the ending point for us? Okay.
One thing said it goes 1 foot into the house.
Yeah. So it's not really necessarily to the meter. I mean, yeah. Well, yeah.
we're not required to replace anything after the meter, but basically up to the meter. You can't do a partial replacement. You have to go up to where the lead service line ends, which would be at the meter.
Okay, so
I mean, unless. Okay. And what good is this going to do if they have lead pipes in the house? And I mean, don't they still have a problem?
There can be lead solder in the home. There can be galvanized.
Yeah, they talked about the lead solder and the
There can be-
meters, which that's not going to be as much of a problem as just lead pipes themselves.
Well, that and there also can be galvanized piping
Yeah.
in the home, which might be pitted
Right.
and contain lead where it was deposited in over their periods of time. But when you do the draws, essentially the responsibility to ensure compliance has been met by the township if we've replaced that lead service line, and none of that source is coming from a part of the infrastructure that is the township's responsibility.
Right.
If we get a hot read, then ultimately it becomes the resident's responsibility to address what those contributing factors are within their home. But one of it brings up, your comment brings up a very good point. Anytime we get a hot read, and when I say hot read, I mean an exceedance of the lead standard within a home that we're testing, it behooves us to resolve any of the contributing factors to that hot read, which is basically a proactive approach in addressing the replacement of those lead service lines all the way up to and inside the home as the legislation mandates us to. So it would be my recommendation, and it would be my recommendation to have a standing policy that if we do have an exceedance, if we have a hot read on a home, that we go ahead and replace those regardless of where that home sits on our required replacement schedule. Because the legislation does require that the township inventory all the lead service lines in the community and then replace them at a rate of, I believe, 5% per year.
5% a year.
7% per year, with a maximum of, I think, 20 years to have those
Right.
all replaced.
2038 or
Yep.
something.
So,
around there.
and in order to do that, what I would like to do is also discuss the possibility of bringing a vendor online through the competitive bidding process to have somebody in place with a set schedule of pricing for various replacement types. Whether we're going to be doing a boring or a pull through or an open cut, and then also distances and length of pipe, so that we have those rates established already, so that John in the field has access to a vendor to do that work under the competitive bidding arrangement to get those things done as they arise, rather than being reactive. I like to be proactive to address these problems as they come up, rather than sit on them for a while.
Since we're going to be paying the freight on this, why wouldn't we just pick the cheapest, the least expensive way to do it for us?
Well, I think the cheapest option.
And I mean, it has to, I mean, which one way or another you're going to be replacing that
Right,
pipe.
I think
what's the
the cheaper,
least expensive?
The logistics plays the role, is where it's
in the basement, or most of those.
So what might be an inexpensive way for one guy straight up his yard, you might have to go through
Correct,
things
we just
that
did one
the
of those,
same thing
yes.
wouldn't be the.
Right.
Right, so the cheaper
Got it.
option might depend upon the specific situation.
And how are we gonna do the inventory? I'm interested how we're gonna be able to do the inventory.
The preliminary inventory has to be done by looking through the tab sheets and any other records we have on file currently. And
Trying
then
to-
by 2025, we actually have to go in and visually inspect every single one that we think is lead and say yes or no.
So you have to have a plan for the inventory by the end of the year.
Right.
End of the calendar year, you have to do the inventory by 2025.
Right.
So when we can eliminate some
Just
homes,
was wondering if, if people are gonna be able to volunteer and say, hey, I have one.
And when we did our lead and copper testing this season, there was actually a letter in the packet that asked them to verify for us and gave them directions on how to do that. And just so everybody knows, we did have one exceedance in this round
Right.
of testing, and it's been resolved.
Well, John, when you gonna pick me up and get your tablet and we go for a ride? And I'll explain to you, the majority of the ones that I know, like in my neighborhood, I was sitting there thinking today, there's 19 in my neighborhood. And then we got Whitehall, Brymore. So come and get me, get a
Highland.
pad and paper out, we'll go for a ride and mark the addresses down.
We will do that. Thank you
A lot of
for,
time.
thanks for volunteering.
That might be a good idea too, because if you're gonna have some, removal and reconstruction in the same area, sometimes it's better than skipping all over the place. It's easier to control it.
Right. I've got one question. How are you going to determine how to test and who you're going to test?
That's in a set pool that was done way before I even came. I believe Les might have been involved in that initial pool. And the state requires us to stick with those 60 locations unless they're updated. His son's house was updated, so he's no longer on that list. But you have to knock out all 60 before you can change that list.
if I recall from my previous experience, it was age of home, geographically had to be spread across the community as a representative sample across the community. It couldn't be just lumped in one area. So there are a variety of different factors, what homes you chose. We also did ones where we could trust that the resident was going to take a proper and accurate sample. If they were a trustworthy individual or they had a background or something like that and how to do the sampling, we would handle it that way. Because sometimes if you get an inexperienced resident that doesn't follow the regulations and they go pull the sample out of their toilet tank or something like that, obviously, and that's a far end of the spectrum, but just to illustrate why you pick certain residents, you just want to make sure that that sample is good, it's a good sample, and it's been drawn according to the instructions, so.
What gets me is, what this is written in here is that's gonna be all at our expense.
Yes.
When they mandate that and say that you got to do that, well, then maybe they should be floating some money our way to cover that cost.
And there have been a variety of different challenges in the courts relative to that, and that it was an unfunded mandate, and all those to date have failed. Matter of fact, GLWA had a large group moving forward to that they were suing against these regulations, not only the arbitrary standard that they're using, but also the mandate to replace all the way up into the home, and unfortunately that lost about a month ago, something along those lines. So yeah, it wasn't, it hasn't been without a fight.
Well, that could bankrupt some, water.
Sure. And anytime you get involved in working on private property in the basement or crawl space of somebody's home, you unfortunately become liable, or the impression is that you're liable for some potential damage that may or may have already existed at that property. So those are all concerns that were expressed to the regulatory agencies, but unfortunately it kind of fell on deaf ears. I did find one thing that was curious. I was at a seminar a little while ago, a couple of months ago, and one of the reasons to do the full replacement rather than a partial replacement, which has been a practice over time, is they would see when you would do a partial replacement, so not up all the way into the home, actually an increase in lead in the water when they did a partial replacement, because the reconnection to that lead line would disturb it, and it would cause more of an issue than if you didn't touch it to begin with. So that's the reason that they're recommending, or they're not recommending, but mandating that there's a full replacement rather than a partial, so.
But one other question, Derek. The letter, the township letter on the back of this indicates that the resident would be notified, he can accept or decline. The wording about the 14 days, how is the resident going to be notified, and when does that 14-day clock, how would that start? Seems to me like if a resident had gone to Florida for the winter or something like that, I mean, are we going to word that a little differently?
Yeah,
such
so
that-
this is a draft, and this
Yeah.
draft was formulated based upon Dearborn's letter
Okay.
that they're passing out. John and I attend the DPW directors meeting once a month, and we're all dealing with the same exact problem. All communities are. So, you know, as we bounce ideas back and forth across each other, this was something that Dearborn's using, and this is just a draft. So we can modify this, and that's why, once again, I wanted to bring it to your attention, because I rely on you to make comments like that. Well, what about this? What about that? Is there a better way to do this? And as we move forward with this large obligation, you know, letters like this need to be crafted, need to be developed, need to be refined, and need to be distributed in order to make sure we have an effective program moving forward. So to your point, your input on that letter and any of the other correspondence that was included in this memo is very valuable, and I look forward to those comments. So if you have those, please let me know.
And we do our due diligence, we work with everybody. That's really just to get their attention to say, look, if you don't want us to help you, you're on your own.
Oh, I
after
understand that, I agree with all that.
But we
I
wouldn't,
just-
we're not gonna move forward with it without having a lengthy conversation with them and
It was
explaining.
just in the news where the guy lost his house over an $8.14.
Which
lack
you
of tax
know
payment.
that is,
Was-
that wasn't the whole story, because that would never happen without him ignoring something. And this would be like a first-class mailing. It's
Oh, yeah.
not, you know,
Yep.
so it's gonna be forwarded if they're down in Florida or something. But those are the things that
We
have
like
to be,
face-to-face, actually.
have to be looked at. Well, if they're around.
Available, yeah.
And this really isn't something that we're going to mail out to the residents in mass. This is
And-
going to be, John identifies a lead service
Identify
line.
the service
He
line.
talks to the person, says, you got a problem here. We're going to come in and replace it. And the guy says no, or the gal says, no, I don't want you on my property. Well, you need to sign this and relieve us of
Right.
the responsibility. We advise you what needed to be done. You're declining us going in there and taking care of that. We fulfilled our obligation. So that's what this is about more
Correct.
than anything.
Understood.
Next question is, what size are you installing?
Size on size currently,
Same size,
correct.
3/4 inch, or are you
Correct.
gonna put 1 inch? Because we don't have any more 3/4 inch. The standard is 1 inch tap and a 3/4 inch meter.
Correct. So, like, as of right now, we're going size on size. If they have 3/4, they get 3/4 back.
On this,
Because we're not gonna make a new tab.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you're not changing the tap.
on this legislation, well, go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You'll have to change the tap because the corporation cock that is in the main is a lead type, which is copper's not gonna hook up to it. The corporation cock on lead is about this big around and flat. And what they do is they take the copper and they hammer it flat. And then they screw that on there, and that's how the lead ones work. There's no way you can get copper hooked up to that.
Yeah, if we do have to run a new tap, you're right, taking it all the way back to the main anyway, so if that's necessary, we'll have to do
Yeah.
that.
That makes sense.
I'll have to be quick to unscrew it, screw a new one in.
Yeah. Put a wetsuit on or something like that.
On this water situation with the piping, the original legislation, is that federal or is it state? Because somebody would have passed it upstairs, then everybody that's downstream is being asked to go ahead and buy in or told to buy in. So I didn't notice where the original legislation was moved and voted and passed. I just didn't notice it in these materials.
Yeah, so the state legislation, the state of Michigan legislation
Okay.
supersedes, or it doesn't supersede it, it goes beyond actually the EPA regulations. So the legislation that you're looking at today and the one we're talking about today is state legislation, state of Michigan legislation.
Okay.
Because the state of
So-
Michigan actually has a higher standard, and when I mean higher, I mean a lower standard for lead in the water supply than
I-
even the EPA.
I get that. So we're talking about it's state legislation that was passed.
Right.
Correct.
And signed by
Correct.
the governor.
Correct.
Okay. Then on a estimate, which I'm gonna call a guesstimate, that means where we have no idea what the real cost is, but we need to start looking at that. And I've seen other guesstimates with more zeros. But in any event, let's suppose we take a house on Whitehall, fairly close to the road. I don't think there's any curbing in there. Maybe Les would know, but maybe they're like 35, 40 feet to the front door. So if we're gonna run a line like that, if the meter's right in front, we're gonna replace stuff to the house. What's that gonna cost? Does anybody have an idea yet?
That'll ballpark at $2,000.
Okay.
There are a lot of variables, but.
Well, sure, that's why I said it's a guesstimate. It's not an estimate, it's a guesstimate, so a couple $1,000.
Right. Anywhere, and the range I've seen is anywhere between 1,500 and $4,000, right around there, so.
Depends on the run, too.
Depends upon the run, depends upon the material.
Across the street, how much
Yep.
extensive work they have to do in the basement.
Anybody else?
Any other questions?
No, we beat that to death.
Okay.
What I would like to do in subsequent meetings is discuss this further, get input from you, but also have a vendor in place that John can use when he has a situation come up where we have a lead service line we need to have replaced. That way, there aren't any questions about competitive bids. We've gone out to bid with a menu of services, and he has a vendor in place to be able to do that work. So,
And like Derek had mentioned, we've been working through the Downriver Community Conference. A lot of the communities are doing the same thing. Trenton's has somebody on board right now where they pull the service through instead of having to bore a new one up through the floor itself. So there's options out there. And we're not the only ones doing this. As you can see by the letter attached here, Oak Park everybody has them.
Well, they all have to, so.
right.
Do you have any idea about how many homes we might be dealing with? Just a wild guess?
John and I had talked about that the other day.
Les, how about your input? I guess 400
Well, there's
total?
19 in my subdivision,
So is 400 a good,
and I don't
Number?
know how many would have to go up and down on Bryamore or Whitehall and check that out. But then there's sleepers that, like my
Right.
son's house, I never knew he had a lead line in that place. But who knows what else is, because that house was built in the 20s. They certainly had copper in the 20s.
You're talking like, let's just say it's 400 homes. 400 homes at 7% per year. So you're not talking a huge number. Not like some of these other communities like Dearborn. They have a program, they're doing like $2 million a year.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
I mean, it's gonna be a cost we're gonna have to budget for. But at the schedule that's being established here, at the amount of homes that we have, we don't think that it's, something that's debilitating as far as expense is concerned. So,
We had all these lead lines, is that they couldn't get copper when those homes were built. And that's, the majority of the homes that we know have lead lines. There's only a few that kind of snuck up on us that we didn't know about.
Just as an aside, what's in this building?
copper?
so most homes are,
Service to this building is copper,
It's a
all
water
of it?
main. It's a water main coming in,
Okay.
it's cast iron. And then where the meters at, they got copper around the meters and a bypass and all that stuff.
All right. John, the Safeway report?
Safeway has not been back in the last month. The only part they have left is along the Thoroughfare Canal, and it's just been way too wet for them to access that. So we may have to wait till next spring to get that piece completed.
That's
Other
one
than
little
that,
final
they got
segment.
like a little less than 2,000 feet left to go out of the whole section. So they did a great job for us again, and hopefully they'll be back in the spring.
Are they, didn't they come back early last year?
They
Didn't
did.
we do something?
Yes,
Let's
because the
set-
weather
let-
was nice
right.
enough for them to go
We
ahead
should
and,
be- Whatever we had to do, we should set ourselves up again so that,
absolutely, as soon as the
We
weather's
don't
good
have
enough
to-
for them to get here.
yeah.
Actually, that section would be great during the winter because it's frozen. They can get back there with their equipment.
yeah. So we should be able to use them, let them
We'll
work.
keep you abreast.
Okay.
And keep in mind that we do have a budget established for their services for the fiscal year, but if there's, we have a certain amount that we have to do within 5 years, I think is what the plan was.
Right.
So keep in mind that if we pull some of that forward, although it might go outside the budget that we have available within the fiscal year, if it makes good fiscal sense for us to move forward with that, and it saves us money in the long run, that would be money that we were going to spend next year.
What they actually did was say, don't pay us until the next budget, but let us come in and do the work.
Okay.
And do it that way, so you didn't even have to pull any money out,
Okay.
so.
All right. Good information to know. Thank you.
Ryan? Want to give us an update?
First update is with the lab office with the HVAC. We are still waiting on the maker of the heat equipment that's on the roof. They're supposed to show up at the plant and look at that unit to see if they can help us with that unit. And I've been kind of going back and forth on emails with them. I'm pretty sure that they have all the information now. So hopefully we can have them out here, within like a week or so, and then they'll look at it, and then we'll.
Been a delay?
Mostly on emails. It's just
I'm not sure
how
why.
they need numbers, model numbers, and I'm pretty sure they have it now.
I'm not sure why the guy didn't come out to visit the site.
He hasn't yet. Yeah.
I don't think I've seen any less than 10 or 15 emails between Ryan and the individual asking for pictures of the equipment and different components of the
Yep,
equipment.
that's correct.
It would have been far more efficient for him to visit the site. I don't know if he's out of state or if he's I don't know what the deal is there, but that's been the holdup. Is it's been a constant stream for probably 2.5 weeks of Ryan, can you take a picture of this?
You got, so Ohio is still involved, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Bruce is. Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah.
Because,
Yep. Bruce.
we need to put pressure on him too.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, this unit is relatively new.
Right.
It's not that old, so.
Yep.
Yep. Well, that's that. New bar screen. We noticed that with the installation of the screens the way it is, we would not have access for maintenance on one part of the screen because the stairwell is in the way of that. So CE Rains and Duperrin are working on that to move that so that we will have access. So we're just waiting on that, and there shouldn't be no issues with that. It's just that we have to wait now, for them to reconfigure that. It's like an access hatch, which is kind of like right where the stairwell is, so we wouldn't have access to it. So it has to be moved either on the other side of the screens where we could access it. But it seems like it's manageable. It's not an issue or nothing. We just have to wait.
So Duperrin would have to make a change in what they
Yeah.
deliver? Okay.
Yep. So that's that on that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any increase in cost or anything like that. It was
Yeah, I
just
don't. Yep.
it was a guard screen that was going to be in the way of the stairway, and I think
Yeah.
they were having to modify it so that it would fit around it or something like that. And that didn't show up until they started with the shop drawings when they actually got into the nitty gritty of things.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
but it sounds like it's being resolved, so it wasn't any kind of major issue or anything. So.
Next on here is the heat with the boiler. We had expert heating we had them out about a couple weeks ago, and the heating elements are leaking with the boiler. So with the gaskets, I guess, the rubber, I guess, some of them are leaking. So expert would not sign off on the boiler so that we can use it.
Did you call the installer?
We are right now, Monroe.
Right.
Heating and cooling were the installers of the boiler, and
Correct.
we're gonna have them out, and C Rains is helping me with that right now. So we'll have them out.
That heat exchanger probably has an extended
Yeah,
warranty
yep.
on it.
Okay.
This again is a relatively new item.
Yeah, it's only 7
old.
years old, and so
So you need to get,
We're gonna
you
have
got
them
Rains
out.
involved in this also?
yes, yep.
Okay, all right.
I'm on that. And then in the meantime, for heat, we just have multiple electric heaters, like wherever we need them. So we're okay for now.
Picked the wrong day for your boiler to go out, didn't you?
Yeah, well. That's all I got.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Ryan.
Ryan.
Have a nice Thanksgiving.
Right.
You guys also. Yep, thanks.
Discussion items. Anybody have any discussion items they wish to bring up?
Just go over the
Eric?
lost water report, I guess, at this opportunity. So our gallons purchased from GLWA, the bill hasn't come in yet for October, but the gallons billed is on there. But for the month of September, we were actually, it put us at 9.937 for the period of time. So just as a heads up on that. And also, I wanted to let you know as far as for the December meeting, we will have the stormwater drainage discussion on there. We wanted to wait till Chairman Cossack was back to have that conversation. We do have the engineer's estimates on those projects, so we'll be able to present those to you. And then I don't know if we want to schedule a study session prior to the meeting to discuss it, but I think that the desire was to have the residents come in and once again engage.
Are you
us in
referring to
conversation.
the Park Lane and the Swan Island?
Yes, yeah. I know, go ahead.
You know whether they did anything on the north end of Swan Island? They were talking about cleaning out that one drain that they thought was clogged, and then they were going to take some elevations and stuff. Have they done any of that, do you know?
We did contact the county after we had that meeting. The county did come out and jet that line and vector that catch basin there. I don't know that it's made anything better out there because I don't think it's been tested
Haven't
yet.
any rain.
Right, exactly, so.
Yeah.
But as far as Rain's doing any kind of estimates up there or shooting elevations, they haven't shot elevations, and I don't think they've put any estimates together for a pump station in that location. So, but we did get the county out to clean that a couple of days after we had met, so.
Okay.
Oh, and then regarding a study session, I know the residents wanted an opportunity to speak their piece. We've got all their contact information, so I'll have to speak with the chairman about maybe doing a study session prior to that meeting in December and give them that opportunity. And then we should have all the information available for you at that meeting to discuss cost, design, all that. So
Great.
those are two things that I had.
Okay. Anybody else? Chairman has no report. We'll go around the table. Commissioner reports. Jim?
Nothing, thank you.
Miranda?
No.
Lenny?
Nothing, sir?
Not at this time.
Les?
No.
Ted?
Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody.
There you go.
Well,
Okay, thank you. Well, if nothing further, I'll entertain a
well,
motion to.
we'll be right before. Just came to my attention. We want to remind everybody. We want to remind everybody about the new waste hauling that starts
Oh, yeah.
next week. So Monday and Tuesday next week. If
Tuesday.
if you're not sure whether you're Monday or Tuesday, put it out Monday. If it isn't picked up, you're Tuesday.
Old pickup continues through the Friday.